In Roman architecture, an insula was a kind of apartment building that housed most of the urban citizen population of ancient Rome, including ordinary people of lower or middle-class status and all but the wealthiest from the upper middle class. The traditional elite and the very wealthy lived in a domus, a large single-family residence. But the two kinds of housing were intermingled in the city and not segregated into separate neighborhoods. The ground-level floor of the insula was used for tabernae, shops and businesses, with the living space upstairs. Like modern apartment buildings, an insula might have a name, usually referring to the owner of the building. Construction. Strabo notes that insulae, like domus, had running water and sanitation. But this kind of housing was sometimes constructed at minimal expense for speculative purposes, resulting in insulae of poor construction. They were built in timber, mud brick, and later primitive concrete, and were prone to fire and collapse, as described by Juvenal, whose satiric purpose in writing should be taken into account. Among his many business interests, Marcus Licinius Crassus speculated in real estate and owned numerous insulae in the city. When one collapsed from poor construction, Cicero purportedly stated that Crassus was happy that he could charge higher rents for a new building than the collapsed one. Living quarters were typically smallest in the building's uppermost floors, with the largest and most expensive apartments being located on the bottom floors. The insulae could be up to 6 or 7 stories high, and despite height restrictions in the imperial era, a few reached 8 or 9 stories. The notably large insula Fellicles or Follicula was located near the Flaminian Circus in Regia IX. The early Christian writer Tertullian condemns the hubris of multiple-story buildings by comparing the Fellicles to the towering homes of the gods. A single insula could accommodate over 40 people in only 3,600 square feet. However, the entire structure usually had about 6 to 7 apartments. Each had about 1,000 square feet because of safety issues and extra flights of stairs. The uppermost floors were the least desirable, and thus the cheapest to rent. Often those floors were without heating, running water or lavatories, which meant their occupants had to use Rome's extensive system of public restrooms. Despite prohibitions, a residence would sometimes dump trash and human excrement out the windows and into the surrounding streets and alleys. Regulation and administration. Augustus instituted reforms aimed at increasing the safety of buildings in the city of Rome. Because of the dangers of fire and collapse, the height of the insulae were restricted by Augustus to 70 Roman feet called the pes, and again by Emperor Nero down to 60 Roman feet after the Great Fire of Rome. According to the 4th century Reginaries, there were about 42,000–46,000 insulae in the city, as compared to about 1,790 domus in the late 3rd century. Data on the number of insulae and to a lesser extent domus are used for classical demography. The city's population in the late 3rd century is thought to have fluctuated between 700,000 – 800,000, down from more than 1 million, based also on figures for the amount of grain required to feed the population in Rome and surrounding areas.